They teach you about Harlem's Renaissance, jazz at the Cotton Club, writers like Baldwin and Hughes, the roar of black ambition, but they don't dwell on how it all blew up in one furious night that the city quietly tried to hush. I'm talking about the Harlem Riot of March 19th to 20th, 1935, the one historians call New York's first modern race riot. Forgotten in textbooks, overshadowed by later uprisings, erased in plain sight. But it happened, and what it revealed about inequality and police brutality still echoes through the streets today. It began over something trivial: a teenager allegedly shoplifting a penknife from a white-owned store near 135th Street. The police chased the kid, accusations flew, a crowd gathered, rumors spread fast that the boy had been beaten or even killed. But it wasn't the knife that lit the fuse. It was the fact that Harlem had been starving under the weight of the Great Depression. Jobs were vanishing, food lines wrapped around blocks, and services in black neighborhoods were starved. A commission later told Mayor LaGuardia that unemployment was 5 times higher in Harlem than the rest of the city, housing overcrowded and hunger everywhere, yet no relief in sight. That tinderbox needed only a spark. The rumors became the spark. The crowd turned violent, storefronts were shattered, cars torched. The first night of unrest smashed nearly $2 million of property. 3 people were hospitalized. People talk about riots nowadays, but that one, it barely registers. But here's what they don't teach you. City leaders moved fast to frame it as an isolated outburst of criminality, not a reaction to systemic neglect. They convened the Mayor's Commission on Conditions in Harlem, commissioned academic E. Franklin Frazier to investigate, but then quietly suppressed much of the uncomfortable findings. LaGuardia asked Alain Locke to review it, and Locke's confidential report blamed long-term racism in housing, policing, and employment for creating emotional tension that demanded release. Publicly, however, the narrative stayed tight. A few bad kids, some hooliganism, quickly contained. Schools didn't recount it in civics class. Media moved on. Harlem Renaissance stories ignored the violence. And so this riot became a ghost, a truth erased by omission. But the people who lived through it didn't forget. Word of mouth carried the story. They remembered how police showed up with clubs, how people fought back throwing stones, how the neighborhood burned around them. They remembered LaGuardia ordering cleanup crews and sanitation workers to board up windows, the Red Cross handing out lemonade and crullers, how traffic returned, but trust didn't. They remembered that after 2 days, what the official ledger counted as disorder masked a deeper unrest, a community demanding dignity. And though 6 people died and hundreds were injured, recorded arrests were minimal, and legal accountability was even lighter. That discomfort was too volatile to preserve. Better to sweep it under the rug and claim Harlem would never see a riot again. It's easier to tell stories of peace than stories of pain. So when the 1943 riot and later the 1964 uprising exploded, they got more attention, not just because the numbers were bigger, but because the civil rights era framed them differently. But without acknowledging 1935, you lose the pattern, how economic desperation, frustration with powerlessness, and unchecked policing bred a slow-burning fury. That riot was the blueprint, the first public breaking point. After 1935, city officials knew to diffuse tension before it spilled. This erasure isn't accidental. By suppressing 1935, the city erased the precedent and erased the possibility that Harlem's unrest was rooted in long-standing systemic neglect. They sanitized the story, turned it into a one-off street riot, conveniently forgetting the Albany-style mass unemployment where black residents faced 5 times unemployment, segregated housing, and police bias so strong it turned suspicion into violence. And so Harlem's early resistance became a footnote, but the scars stayed, passed down through generations as distrust in public systems. A neighborhood traumatized and ignored, whose first roar was rewritten into silence. Think about what that means. A riot so significant it cost millions in damage, injured dozens, killed people, and then vanished from memory while Harlem continued to rebuild. Later novels by Baldwin, Ellison, and others reference riots, but not this one. At best, they point to the 1943 violence or 1964. Nobody tells you that the first modern upheaval happened under LaGuardia, before Central Park was even fully built, during the Renaissance glow. It's like the city decided to hit the delete button on history. That's why you don't see plaques or documentaries about 1935. You walk past the storefronts now filled with cafes or galleries and never see the boarded-up windows, the shattered glass, the community shaking with frustration that had nowhere else to go, but it happened, and witnesses told it. For decades, elders spoke of mobs smashing store windows along 125th and Lenox Boulevard. They spoke of police on horseback charging crowds. They spoke of the Red Cross and the city hastily remaking the streets to look normal again. But they also spoke of fear, kids taught to avoid police, parents who wouldn't speak of what they saw. The trauma outlasted the riot, and when the next riot came along, it wasn't in a vacuum. The anger was fed by the knowledge that Harlem's earliest resistance was forgotten. That riot didn't explode from nowhere. It was rekindled. So yeah, New York brags about the Harlem Renaissance. They point to Sugar Hill, the Apollo, literary giants. But beneath that, there was a rupture, a fracture in the foundations. The riot of 1935 was the first time Harlem showed the world it wouldn't take indignity silently anymore. Then the world shut its eyes. Later, more eruptions happened, but those first embers from 35 were extinguished on purpose. That's the erasure. Next time someone says Harlem's history is all art and music, ask them, do you know about the riot in March of 1935? Do you know how it was buried? How the city replaced chaos with cleanliness, fear with forgetting? Because that moment changed everything, and yet nobody admits it. That's the Harlem they tried to erase.